We begin today's wrestling news and rumors video with a bit of news regarding John Cena, and how long John Cena plans to spend back in WWE following his huge return to the company at Money in the Bank 2021. As most of you are likely aware, John Cena has returned to WWE for a major program with the head of the table, Roman Reigns, leading up to SummerSlam 2021, where Cena's and Reigns' feud will most certainly culminate in a Universal Championship match at SummerSlam, with WWE feeling John Cena versus Roman Reigns will make SummerSlam have that WrestleMania feel to it, which is what the company is going after. Without question, there really could not be a bigger storyline for Roman Reigns heading into the second biggest pay-per-view of the year. And as we had touched upon in one of our last videos, all signs point to Roman Reigns besting John Cena and defeating the 16-time world champion at SummerSlam. Now, according to a new backstage rumor, John Cena is reportedly only returning to WWE for the storyline with Roman Reigns for SummerSlam, and once the pay-per-view is over and done with on August 21st, John Cena will apparently be leaving WWE to begin filming for one of his upcoming movies, Argylle. While a lot of fans are likely going to be a bit disappointed that John Cena is not going to be sticking around in WWE for very long, his appearances over the next few weeks on SmackDown and potentially even Raw again will definitely help to increase the ratings and viewership for WWE, and the WWE will get a chance to book that blockbuster Roman Reigns vs John Cena match. Now, had John Cena had more time for his WWE return, there is a good chance that Vince would have likely had John Cena win the Universal title at some point, which would have allowed for Cena to break Ric Flair's title record. But again, John Cena is only back in WWE for roughly 1 month, and would not be able to fulfill his duties as the world champion on SmackDown with all of his other acting roles outside of wrestling. Regardless, John Cena is back for the immediate future, and there's no doubt that John Cena's feud with Roman Reigns will be very exciting and noteworthy. And by all means, Roman Reigns is in a completely different phase of his career compared to the last time he faced off against John Cena. And there is no doubt that a lot of fans feel as though Cena has taken on a challenge he will not be able to finish, as the Tribal Chief is just on another level right now, but the feud will certainly be very intriguing. Now, as many of you are likely aware, the former SmackDown Women's Champion Sasha Banks was advertised to show up on the July 16th episode of Friday Night SmackDown, which featured the return of live fans, as Sasha was promoted on the poster for this show, but shockingly enough, Sasha Banks did not show up, nor did Banks make any sort of an appearance at Money in the Bank 2021, which has not surprisingly gotten many fans wondering why Sasha Banks has not returned to WWE yet, despite the company previously advertising her return. And when will Sasha Banks be coming back to WWE? Well, according to one of our sources, Vince McMahon and WWE decided to postpone Sasha Banks' return on SmackDown from last week. And there is apparently a very good chance that Sasha Banks will be returning this coming week on the July 23rd edition of SmackDown. For those of you unaware, on this week's edition of SmackDown, WWE have booked a SmackDown Women's Championship rematch between Bianca Belair and Carmella, and as you would likely expect, Bianca Belair is likely going to be retaining her SmackDown Women's title against Carmella once again, although the rumor mentions that WWE are planning for Sasha Banks to then make her surprise return to confront Bianca Belair, with Sasha Banks setting her sights on reclaiming the championship she had lost to Bianca Belair at WrestleMania 37, and it is even possible that Sasha Banks could return during Bianca's title defense against Carmella and interfere in the match, thus ending it, which would keep Carmella looking a bit stronger in defeat, as she would not have to be pinned again by Bianca. Whatever the case may be, WWE plan for Sasha Banks to return and feud with Bianca Belair for the SmackDown Women's title moving forward, likely culminating in a title match at SummerSlam. And considering Banks and Belair had a stellar match at WrestleMania 37, it's not really that big of a surprise that Vince wants to book this match again for the second biggest pay-per-view of the year. And there really is not any other storyline that would make sense for Sasha Banks after her return, even though some fans are complaining that WWE are basically just repeating the same matches and storylines over and over, which includes Bianca Belair versus Sasha Banks, and that WWE should instead give another women's division star, perhaps the debuting Toni Storm, a chance at Bianca's title on SmackDown. Now let us know your thoughts on the rumors going around that Sasha Banks will be returning on this week's episode of SmackDown to confront Bianca Belair and demand a rematch for that SmackDown Women's Championship. And would this be of any interest to you? Or should WWE give this title feud opportunity to someone like Toni Storm or anyone else on the SmackDown women's roster? As many of you have likely heard by now, there was some breaking news earlier today as it was confirmed by multiple sources that former WWE champion the Cult of Personality CM Punk is finally planning a return to wrestling in the near future, and that CM Punk is currently in negotiations with a few companies for his return to the ring, with WWE and AEW being the two major promotions that CM Punk has been working with to come to terms on a new deal. While some reports have speculated that CM Punk is more likely to end up in AEW All Elite Wrestling, according to a new leaked backstage rumor, that is the furthest thing from the case, and it looks as though CM Punk would be making his return to wrestling in WWE. Apparently, when CM Punk had reached out to WWE that he was wanting to return to wrestling and basically letting Vince McMahon know that he's willing to contemplate an offer from WWE as well as talk with AEW, Vince basically made it clear to CM Punk that whatever the price may be, he wants Punk to return to WWE. With one source mentioning that Vince McMahon is fully aware that CM Punk is an absolutely massive star that they simply can't lose to AEW, when their ratings and viewership are very low recently, and if CM Punk were to join AEW, All Elite Wrestling's viewership could legitimately compete or even overtake WWE, which is something that McMahon reportedly will not allow under any circumstances, especially when there is so much hype regarding CM Punk. Now, it is a bit surprising that after all of these years, CM Punk is reportedly planning a return to wrestling, but regardless, with Vince McMahon apparently making a kind of contract offer that AEW would not be able to match, the possibility of CM Punk making his return to WWE sometime later this year in 2021 is extremely possible, and downright likely at this point, which did not even seem possible at the beginning of the year, which shows how quickly things can change in the world of wrestling. While a lot of fans were definitely happy to see Jeff Hardy return on this past week's edition of Raw with his No More Words entrance music, there's no doubt that Jeff Hardy's surprise win over the debuting NXT champion Karrion Kross was not well received by not only many fans, but lots within WWE. Apparently, a lot of NXT superstars were very disappointed with the way Karrion Kross was booked in his Raw debut match, because despite seemingly being unbeatable in NXT, he took a loss to Jeff Hardy, who, in all honesty, has been nothing more than a mid-card level talent for quite some time, with the overwhelming feeling being that many in NXT are not confident that any of their own talents can succeed on the main roster, as Vince seems to find a way to derail the momentum of most NXT call-ups. And let us know your thoughts on Karrion Kross losing his Raw debut match to Jeff Hardy this week.